Message from Starfleet Command, top priority.
You are listening to the TrekRanks podcast, a member of the Tricorder Transmissions Podcast Network. This is episode 109, featuring the top 5 TOS Guilty Pleasure Episodes. Welcome, Star Trek fans. I'm Jim Moorhouse, and I'm the host of the TrekRanks podcast, and tonight we are correcting a grave injustice. We're doing our first standalone TOS topic in exactly 3 years, and I really had no idea that we'd gone so long without doing TOS, which is nuts. So tonight we're fixing that. We're doing TOS Guilty Pleasure Episodes. It's our first TOS topic since we did Underrated way back in episode 26. And I will say we did do 2 topics recently. One was Feels Like TOS episodes, so that one kind of had a little flair. And then we did top 5 Twilight Zone episodes of Trek, and that one really felt like a TOS topic because a lot of our picks were for that. Which brings us to our guest tonight, because our first guest was on that Twilight Zone episode. Hailing from the San Diego sector, it is Ryan Thomas Riddle. Ryan, welcome back.
It's great to be back, and it's great to just specifically talk about TOS, even though we did talk about TOS a lot, or at least I remember I did when we talked about the Twilight Zone.
I think I had one TOS episode. You probably had maybe about 3, and
all 5 probably.
No, I think Grace had all 5, and you had a couple of TNGs in there. All right, we'll talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Our second guest, I have to say that I am really excited to finally get him on. It's long overdue. He's sent us a couple of voicemails over the past year, including one for our top 5 Odo episodes and one for our Enterprise Underrated show. And tonight we're finally working it out. We're getting him on. Let's have a warm TrekRanks welcome to Rogue Mogue himself. It's Caleb Dorsch. Caleb, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. It's a good way to spend my spring break. So
yes.
Finally happy to be aboard.
That is fantastic. Well, we're going to start, as you know, with our Trek origin story for our first-time guest. So, Caleb, tell us a little bit about how you got into Trek and what's your favorite series, and are you a completist? Anything you want to catch us up on?
All righty. So I actually first got into Star Trek when I was in elementary school. I was actually homeschooled until the end of 4th grade. So during that stretch of kindergarten through 4th grade, my goal every day was to get my work done by noon, because right after lunch on the Sci-Fi Channel were reruns of the original series in syndication. And so it was always the original series and Lost in Space. Quantum Leap was on that afternoon. Just a whole bunch of sci-fi goodness. And, me being a young kid at the time, my parents had no qualms with me watching the original series. So that's where I first got into it. But then I kind of fell away for a while. Really was college when Netflix started getting all the Star Trek shows on streaming again. I was able to dive in. I rewatched all the original series then, and then I just made it my mission to watch it all. So yes, I am a completist as of about a year ago. So I right when the quarantine lockdown started, I was in the middle of watching Enterprise, finally finished that at some point over the summer, or maybe it was in the early fall. So that was really good. I'm glad I've been able to keep up with all of that, and I've been watching all of the new shows as well. So it's been good. I would have to say my favorite show out of them all is DS9, but Disco is really close. It's really, really close. Yeah, I'm really enjoying everything. What a time to be a Trek fan.
That's awesome, especially after that 3rd season of Discovery. Okay, so Deep Space Nine, that makes a lot of sense. A popular answer. All right, well, that I didn't realize you just. I think I did. I remember seeing you on Twitter talking about your getting caught up and becoming a completist during the last year. So, a fresh perspective on Trek. All right, let's get into our TrekRanks recalibration and get into this topic.
Let's start with something small, like a recalibration of the EPS manifolds.
As regular listeners will know by now, general or number one of the TrekRanks charter is that we love Trek. We love to rank Trek via some deep dive topics just to get the conversation started. And remember, it's not about the ranks. That's just our excuse to talk about Star Trek because, as Mr. Spock himself has said many times, our show is all about
infinite diversity in infinite combinations, symbolizing the elements that create truth and beauty.
No wrong answers. It's not about being right or definitive in any way. It's about sharing the things we love about Star Trek. We love it all, from TOS to TNG, straight through to Enterprise and the Kelvin timeline, and now Discovery and short treks and Star Trek Picard and Lower Decks. It's all fair game here on the TrekRanks podcast. Oh, there's no black alert tonight because we're just talking about TOS. So one final reminder, we use episodes as a shorthand term, but normally I say the 13 films are always in play, but actually just 6 films are in play tonight if you want to choose a film as a guilty pleasure.
Have boosted power to the communications bandwidth.
We appreciate that, Mr. Kim, and you can find TrekRanks on Subspace at TrekRanks.com. You can contact me directly on Twitter at TrekRanks or at Enterprise Extra, and you can also call and leave us a message with your own picks at 609-512-LLAP. That's 609-512-5527. All right, Ryan and Caleb, why don't you guys let everybody know how they get a hold of you on Subspace? Ryan.
Yeah, you can find me on the Twitters at Ryan T. Riddle, where I talk nothing but Trek, mostly Trek, all the time. And you can check out my portfolio website of all my writing and all that other stuff at ryanthomasriddle.com.
Love it. And Caleb, I already teased your handle, but tell everybody how they can get a hold of you on Twitter.
And everyone always loves that handle for some reason.
It is. There's something about it. It's a kind of it's lyrical.
It is at Rogue Moog on Twitter. And I'm a teacher. I teach science. So I tweet about 80% Trek, 10% about my dogs, and then 10% about random chemistry things that are happening. So.
All right. That is fantastic. All right. Let's activate our level 1 diagnostic to get into today's show.
Run a level 1 diagnostic series. Come.
So for our Guilty Pleasure series, this is the 4th one we're doing, by the way. We've done TNG, Voyager, and Enterprise. So after we get this one done, we'll have DS9 to do at some point. We probably won't touch Guilty Pleasures with the new series for a while, but get the 5 classic ones out of the way. So we like to just reset with a quick definition of what we mean by guilty pleasure. So obviously no one ever really truly feels guilty watching any episode of Star Trek. We love them all. But there are those episodes out there that maybe aren't exactly top 10 quality. People sometimes make fun of them, or for whatever reason, they have just a bit of a reputation. So I think, everybody knows what a guilty pleasure is. We don't need to explain it anything more than that. This episode is just about highlighting those misunderstood or disrespected episodes that for some reason you like personally, for whatever reason that is. So could be because of one scene or the overall tone of the episode or a performance, but despite their reputation, you love it. So no guilt here. Let's get into our prime directives.
But what you're proposing is exactly the kind of tampering the prime directive prohibits.
Okay, Ryan, let's start with you. I can't wait to hear how you guys did this. How did you define your prime directive in order to finalize your picks?
Well, one, I just looked at the whole of TOS. I left nothing off the table if it was TOS related, right? That's the 6 movies, the 80 episodes, including the pilots, and anything ancillary. And that's all I'll say about that for now until we get into the list. But I looked at things that when I was a kid or when I was growing up watching Star Trek that I sort of gravitated to, or things that reminded me of why I love Trek in the first place, at least the original series. And some things are more about how it made me feel watching it as a kid. And other parts of it were how it made me feel as an adult, making me feel like a kid again.
Yeah, that is really clever. There's a little bit of that in my prime directive as well, for sure. Caleb, how did you break it down?
So mine's actually very similar to Ryan's. I think it was equal parts. I either really enjoyed it as a kid or it has increased my appreciation for Star Trek now, especially now that I've seen all 800 episodes and some. And in terms of just how I went about determining which episodes, I looked at the IMDb list in descending order, and I basically chopped it off at the middle mark. So basically, I had to be ranked number 41 or below. So 41 to 80 out of the 80 episodes. And I actually excluded the movies. I did not include any of the movies in my list. So I just kept it to the 3 seasons.
All right. I love when the IMDb rankings show up in someone's Prime Directive. That's really good. So I did something that I don't normally do. I went back to our TOS episodes, basically things like episodes I grew to love and TOS underrated. I eliminated all of the TOS episodes that I've talked about because there's a few that really could fall in all 3 of those categories. Episodes I grew to love, TOS underrated, and now guilty pleasure. So I didn't want to pick something that I'd picked once before, maybe twice before. So I decided I am going to eliminate all TOS episodes that I've previously talked about on TrekRanks. So I'm picking 5, brand new episodes that I've never talked about and never picked. And once I locked in that framework, then it was just picking the episodes that, like Ryan said, made me feel like I did when I was a kid and how much I loved them as a kid. Some of them are episodes where I didn't find out till I was an adult. Oh, everybody hates that episode? I love that episode because I think of it as when I was 7 years old. I've always loved that episode. So there's a couple of those in there. And then when I rarely do this too, I've decided I went episode 5 to 1 in terms of how I have them ranked on TOS TrekRanks. So that made it easy for me to put them in order. Okay, I think that's everything we need. First, Kudekaton, introduce us to the new order of things.
It'll be alphas like us that determine the future of this quadrant. That will be the new order of things.
Thank you, First Kudekaton. As always, a quick reminder on how we're going to go through the order of things. First, everyone will start with their 5-word summary and a hashtag to tease their pick. Then we'll reveal our TOS Guilty Pleasure episode and the reasons we're choosing it. And at the end, we'll ask everyone for a few secondary systems picks for the choices that just missed our list. And as always, if we have any duplicate picks, make sure you listen for the Defiant Torpedoes. Okay, Ryan, we're going to start with you. What's your number 5 pick for your TOS Guilty Pleasure episodes?
All right, 5 words. A child could do it. Hashtag brain and brain. What is brain? So I'm going to start out with what is considered probably, well, I guess for a long while, the worst of the worst Star Trek episodes.
What could it be? Yeah. A classic.
It's a classic.
So why is it on your list?
Because it is everything kitsch about Star Trek that everyone thinks of almost. Like it almost has all the elements except for the green girl, right? It has the go-go boots. It has the cheesy 60-ish sets. It's just an outrageous kind of improbable story. Shatner is just Shatnering the heck out of every scene he's in. You know, especially that scene where he's like chewing out bones about like, we got to find Spock's brain.
Brain and brain. What is brain?
And put it back, and just it's just a ludicrous episode from start to finish, but it's so cartoony, and it's one of the ones that just kept airing when I was a kid that I just love that episode for just the pure kitsch of it all. It's just it's absurd, but absurd in an entertaining way, and yet it's played so straight that it becomes funny in itself. It becomes its own parody almost instantly.
Yeah, that's really, really well said. I always find it funny that it's like the 6th episode of the season in terms of the production order, but they aired it first. And that's just like, it really, because it kind of sets the tone for the reputation of season 3. And it's like, you didn't have to air this one first. It's the 6th episode you made. But let's put it front and center. This is Trek in season 3. Caleb, what's your take on Spock's brain?
Brain and brain. What is brain?
So I recently started a complete TOS rewatch, and I got through the first 2 seasons successfully, and then deviated for such a long time because I did not want to watch Spock's Brain.
Brain, what is brain?
But I did watch part of it not too long ago, and I actually really just like the seriousness of McCoy at the beginning of this episode. He's like, what happened is medically impossible. Like, there's no way he could be alive. And yet he is. And it's just like, as Ryan said, it's a completely bizarre and absurd topic or episode.
I figured you would love it just because of the teacher.
Yeah.
Which is my favorite part of the episode. I love that stuff. Okay, that's fantastic. That's the perfect start for Guilty Pleasures. Caleb, how about you? What's your number 5 pick?
All right. So my 5 words, I'm going to try and make Ross Webster proud here. Sentient sediment sets symbolic skirmish. Hashtag Vulcan and Klingon world building. It's season 3, episode 22, The Savage Curtain.
Oh, this is awesome.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Fantastic pick.
I really enjoyed this episode a lot as a kid. And then on the recent rewatch, I enjoyed it even more for what it did for just Star Trek world building. I absolutely love just how vast the universe is and how referential it is upon itself. I love that we get an introduction to Surak and Kalish. Even Colonel Green, who I did not realize, but was part of Enterprise.
Yep.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that was a deep cut callback until I'd rewatched the episode. So, yeah, I really like that one. I also absolutely just love the Excalbians, this massive rock monster. I can't mention this episode without mentioning Galaxy Quest and how influenced that rock monster was by this episode alone. So I absolutely enjoyed this one. I thought it was interesting how the whole good versus evil was set up. And it's like you have these 4 historical figures. And then on the good side, you've got only 2 historical figures plus Kirk and Spock, who later become historical figures in the context of their own universe. But it was kind of weird. It's like, why did they include Kirk and Spock so early when they weren't quite, well known yet? So I don't know. I just enjoyed it.
The Yarnak, the Excalbian, he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing, with including Kirk and Spock. Yeah, I love this episode. The world building part is amazing. I mean, literally, this episode is the first time we get Surak, Kalish the Unforgettable, and Colonel Green. I mean, 3 major characters in terms of the history of Star Trek and references and world building. It's so cool and this episode that's dismissed. I think it's like the 3rd to last episode of TOS. It's easily dismissed. Yeah, the fact that it's known for that the fact that it should be known for that is one of the reasons I love it so much. Ryan, how about you? What's your take on the Savage Curtain?
Well, I mean, you gotta love it because it's got Space Lincoln in it. Any episode that starts with Lincoln floating in space in a chair, right, is going to be a good time. But I really like this episode for one particular aspect. And I used to have a T-shirt with this on it. Is when Uhura tells Lincoln, in our time, we've come to not fear words, right?
Yes.
After Lincoln thinks he's misspoken, right, as if he said something offensive to Uhura. And, anytime Uhura gets any sort of spotlight, I love instantly because she's one of my top 3 TOS characters, if not top 3 Star Trek characters. And for that alone, I elevates this episode even more for me. And it is one of those ones when I was a kid, it was always on. It was like, it was either this, Spock's Brain, and something else that I'll get into. And it was always on. It was just like every time you change it to Star Trek in syndication, that's the episode that was playing. I grew to love it.
I love whenever Savage Curtain was on. It's a classic.
I wonder, there's also one of the evil people they brought up was Zora of Tiburon.
Yeah.
And now I wonder with Discovery, is the Zora name any sort of callback to that? Because if so, we're in so much trouble.
No, don't say that. That's good.
Don't give them that idea.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna go somewhere good with it, like she was gonna show up and they were gonna defeat her. But yeah. Okay, fantastic first 2 picks. That we're another classic coming up here. My number 5 pick, 5 words and a hashtag. 34 minutes of glorious Trek hashtag. taken down by E Plebnista. And it is from TOS Season 2. It's the Omega Glory. I'm starting with a big one. I firmly believe that this is a massively kind of misunderstood episode. And yes, the final 10 minutes is just wackadoodle. And the characterizations of the comms and the Yangs by today's standards, there's obviously the problematic territory there. But structurally, in terms of Star Trek storytelling, the first 30 minutes of this are not just an okay episode. They're really, really good. It's really brilliant. They're trying to find a ship. They find it. It's deserted. There's all the dead crewmen turned into crystals. They find a log, says you're dead. You have to beam down to the surface. They do. They find Captain Tracy. They quickly figure out he's up to no good. There's some awesome Prime Directive conversation. There's this Fountain of Youth stuff with Tracy. There's really good production value with like the dread that you feel with the Yangs populating outside the city, like they're going to storm the city. It's just all really good for like 34 minutes. Even the scene in the jail where Kirk is thrown in there with one of the Yangs, William Cloud. I can't remember his name now.
Cloud William.
Sorry. William Cloud. Cloud William. And there's just really good interaction there with Spock and Kirk. Just great Star Trek for 34 minutes. And then it all breaks down with the revelation of the Yankees and the communists and the U.S. Constitution showing up and the Pledge of Allegiance, for God's sake, and Spock as the devil, which actually is kind of cool because Tracy says at one point, like, hey, don't mess with me in this setting because I will win, knowing that he's going to play this devil card with Spock. Some really cool stuff in this episode. I actually enjoy it a lot, the first 35 minutes. It's number 63 at TrekRanks, so not too close to the bottom. And I'll just say, we drained 4 of our phasers and they still came. We killed thousands and they still came. Love that. Ryan, what's your take on the Omega Glory?
I think I mentioned this the last time
you did
when we did the Twilight Zone, because I think I put this on my Twilight Zone pick. It's a very interesting episode. You know, it started out as one of the 3 scripts for the second pilot.
Yeah, it's a Gene Roddenberry story.
Yeah, it's a total Gene Roddenberry story from start to finish. And, you know, I think that episode, like I said, it feels most like a Twilight Zone because it has that twist. Oh, no, it was Earth all along, or, you know, of that nature. But, you know, it is also one of my guilty pleasures that I must watch on July 4th all the time because of we, the people. You know, just that whole, I mean, that is peak Shatner. That is just peak Shatner.
Look at these 3 words written larger than the rest, with a special pride never written before or since. Tall words proudly saying, we the people. That what you call Id Plebnista was not written for the chiefs or the kings or the warriors or the rich or the powerful, but for all the people. Down the centuries, you have slurred the meaning out of the words, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution. These words and the words that follow were not written only for the Yangs, but for the Corms as well.
The Corms?
They must apply to everyone, or they mean nothing. Do you understand?
I love it.
By the way, I just looked it up. It was your number 1 Twilight Zone episode of Trek. So that's fantastic.
Oh, see,
there you go. Caleb, how about you? What's your take on the Omega Glory?
I think I gotta agree with you on the whole Prime Directive aspect of this one. I think that's its strongest part.
Yeah.
Again, going back to some Galaxy Quest love, historical documents. And yeah, the Constitution as the holy words, you know, only from Gene Roddenberry.
Yeah, and not just the Constitution, the Pledge of Allegiance, which I'm sure people outside of the U.S. are like, what the hell is that? The Pledge of Allegiance. We the people is one thing, but oh, man. All right, that's enough of that. Let's go to round 4. Ryan, what's your number 4 pick?
5 words. Their own imperfections killed them. Hashtag a pearl of great price. So this is also another one that was on all the time when I was a kid, and that's the Empath.
Yeah.
This is my comfort episode, to be honest.
What? Wow.
Out of all of Star Trek, this is like my comfort episode. I don't know why. I mean, you guys know me well enough, probably from Twitter, that City on the Edge of Forever is my all-time favorite Star Trek episode. I can talk endlessly about it, all that stuff. But this is an episode that sometimes I just put on to feel good, because it's such an odd duck. In terms of like the production itself, the story's not all that great, because once you get into it, you start thinking the Vian's plans are to torture this poor girl so she saves someone's life, so then they know she's worthy to save their planet.
Yeah,
like it just doesn't, like the logic is not there, right? But I love the interaction of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and there's something comforting for me about that friendship in this episode, right? That there's this care for each of them, and each of them try to conspire against the other to make sure that they're the ones who get chosen to be tortured, so they save the other two. And there's something about that really, really speaks to me, and speaks to perhaps who I am as a person. I don't know, but there's this sense, even like there's a tenderness in the male friendships in this episode, where they pull McCoy off the chains.
Yeah.
And Spock tenderly cradles McCoy's head and gives him comfort in what could be his final moments. And it just, the bond of the 3 men in that episode speaks to me. And then there's also the kind of theatrical Breckian sort of style of the episode that sets it apart from anything else that's in Star Trek. And then the music. The music is fantastic. It's got the best soundtrack of any episode.
You're here.
The mood of the episode is amazing. I like you described it as the tenderness. That's really a cool way to look at it and describe it. I was gonna say I have empathy I feel the pain of it. So I always have trouble relaxing and watching this episode, because I just feel so awful for Jem and McCoy and the other victims that the Vians have run through this horror chamber. So it's interesting that you see that tenderness and connect with it. I love that. I'm gonna go and make sure I rewatch this recently. I know this one came up. We had a really good conversation about it on our episode Villains That Weren't Really Villains, because Adam picked it. He picked the Vians as villains who weren't really villains, and it was a great conversation and really interesting perspective on that. So this is cool. I am really, really fired up about this pick and hearing how you connect with it. Caleb, what's your take on the Empath?
So this one actually was a secondary systems pick for me. I did through and watch this. I don't think I actually remembered watching this one when I was little, but watching it now, I absolutely agree. The score is really what helps make the episode. I mean, the Jem, the actress that plays Jem, literally had to do everything without speaking. Like that takes an incredible amount of talent, and the score helped that a lot. She even went through, I was reading, for the makeup, they had to do stop motion and do it like in reverse to show the physical aspects of the pain like fading away, which is a lot of work for an episode on a budget in season 3. But I really like this one. I like the design of the Vians as well. It reminded me of the Telosians. I got a lot of the same kind of vibes that from the cage and the menagerie, but obviously their motives are a lot different. So yeah, the reveal at the end definitely is kind of backwards in terms of going through these principles of self-sacrifice and will to survive, and the passion to know and love life from the contact that you have. And it's just like, I don't know, the Vians really had it backwards.
Yeah.
I did really like McCoy and Kirk and Spock's moments in these. As a side note, as I was rewatching a lot of episodes for this, season 3, Kirk gets his butt whipped so much, and the Vians, when they just like flipped him over and like threw him to the ground, like, man, can't catch a break. He probably has more broken bones than anybody at this point. But yeah,
I love it. That's really good. It's the set design is so surreal as well. So with the stark blackness, really, really cool. Okay, that's an awesome pick. Caleb, how about you? What's your number 4 pick?
All right. My number 4 pick, winning wager, bests betting brains. # learn before you can reach the stars. It's season 2, episode 16, The Gamesters of Triskelion.
Fantastic. This is on my I could not pick it list because I've picked it before and I love it. So it's one of my favorites.
This is one when I was younger. Absolutely. It was on all the time for whatever reason. I just loved any kind of time where, Kirk got to just fight people because good old Kirk.
Yeah, right.
I want to say that probably was a factor in a bunch of my picks.
But it's a factor in your first 2 picks, that's for sure.
Yeah. And so I really enjoyed that. And honestly, the reveal at the end that the providers are actually just a bunch of brains that think they're a higher power, and they're really not. They get outsmarted by Kirk. And I don't know, it was just super satisfying the way that episode ended for me, especially after how rough it started. The opening moments or once they are on Triskelion and imprisoned, and just the stuff that Uhura and Kirk and Chekhov have to go through is a lot. And, they really, beat them down before they have a chance to bring themselves back up.
Yeah. I mean, I've picked this one a few times. It's top 25 on TrekRanks, and this is definitely one of those ones where I find out other people don't like this episode. They think it's kitschy. I love this episode, everything about it. I'm a huge fan of Galt and the providers and the setup and the framework for this episode. It is so much fun, and jumping around my furniture, pretending like I'm on that. Oh, I picked this for shapes. Yeah, top 5 shapes, because I love the Triskelion logo that they use for their fighting ring. Ryan, what's your take on the Gamesters of Triskelion?
This was actually one I waffled on about putting on the top 5 list too. It's one of those. It is also another sort of the secondary systems guilty pleasure. It's one of those handful of episodes when you point to it, people are like, oh yeah, that's what I think about when I think about Star Trek. Shirtless Kirk, kissing a girl with like green skin or green hair. Everyone's in go-go boots and fighting, right? Yeah, it's just one of those ones that I love. One of these days, I do vow to dress like Shatner in this episode with the harness to like a Folsom Street Fair in San Francisco. One of these years. and
the collar. And the collar.
Well there. And the collar. Yeah, and the collar. That would definitely go over well.
That's awesome.
And I also have to point out just some of the quips that happened just between the crew members. At the beginning of the episode, the opening between Spock and Scotty, when they're trying to diagnose the issue after everyone transported off the ship. He's like, I presume you mean they vanished in a manner not consistent with usual workings of the transporter, Mr. Scott. And that whole thing just had like such a customer servicey vibe to it. And it makes me laugh every time.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that will be coming up in a couple of my picks, that exact type of thing. Okay, let's go to my round 4 pick. We just talked about some of the surreal backdrop of the empath, and this episode also has a surreal backdrop. 5 words and a hashtag. The violence of your heritage hashtag is the pattern for our execution. And it is TOS Season 3, Spectre of the Gun. And the style on this one is incredible. It's at this point, it's kind of apocryphal that the half-built, surreal-looking sets, basically born out of time and budget constraints. It's the classic necessity is the mother of invention, because now these sets, if this was just an episode they filmed on a Western set, no one would ever think of it in the way they think of it now. It's got this unbelievably cool test of time that it stands in terms of the background. And I just feel like it's a visual masterpiece. And not only that, it's got this stylized direction and movement. So I know you guys will remember this, especially you, Ryan, the last scene when the Earps are all kind of marching toward the OK Corral, and like one is joining after another, and they're marching in a straight line. It feels like almost like a stage player, avant-garde, like they're marching like a band. It's really cool. I love that. You got the red backdrop and the skyline, and the final shot of this episode. Speaking of stylized things that I love, Kirk, Spock, Bones, Scotty standing in front of the wood gate under the influence of Spock's mind meld, and then the bullets are just tearing up the fence behind them. It's so cool. It looks so good. This episode, I'm telling you, it stands the test of time. It could have just been a Rifleman ripoff, but it is really, really cool. And it's another one of those great Captain Kirk chooses not to kill episodes, and you can never have too many of those on your list. So I love it. It's, by the way, this is a Gene Coon script, but his name is not on it. It's Lee Cronin. So, Caleb, what's your take on The Spectre of the Gun?
So this is one I actually have not had a chance to rewatch yet recently. So I actually have very little memory of this episode, other than I know it's the whole OK Corral, right? That's the episode we're talking about. Yeah, I am definitely due for a rewatch. It is on the list.
Trust me, I think if you look with that stylized eye, you'll love it. Ryan, what's your take?
Oh, I love this episode. For me, this is just, I think it's one of the best episodes of the third season, for sure. Like, one of the things that I love about TOS is that theatrical presentation of everything.
Yep.
It feels like experimental theater.
Yes, that's a great way to describe what I was trying to say. It's like experimental theater.
Yeah. And, Spectre of the Gun certainly does it, but it actually has a good story to it. I love how they have to think their way out of it. Kirk does the flying kick as well in this one. But, one of the things that's interesting, and I don't know if you know this, Jim, but, Lost in Space also did their own sort of surreal Western set in an episode called The West of Mars. And I'm sure it's not as remembered because, Lost in Space kind of got really cartoony. And then there's also a Western musical called Red Garters that has almost this, like that similar limbo set look that Spectre of the Gun has. So there's kind of like other shows that have done this or other movies, but for some reason the TOS one is the most memorable. It's like when you think about like the OK Corral and all these like half-built Western town sets. That's the one I think everyone thinks of.
Yeah, I vaguely remember the Lost in Space one. The Red Garters I don't remember, so you'll have to steer me to that one. All right, let's go to the soup round. Ryan, what's your number 3 pick?
Eat your soup, courtesy of a loyal establishment. Joanne True.
5 words. Share your pain with me. Hashtag, what does God need with a starship?
I had a feeling this might be out there from somebody.
Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. I know this is the one everyone trots out as this is the worst movie ever. This is Shatner's ego on display. Why is Kirk climbing the mountain? He's making love to the mountain. That whole like bit that this is a movie that's just a vehicle for Shatner's ego through Captain Kirk, which I don't think is true. I agree
with that, actually. I agree with you.
I think Shatner, understood TOS far more than he's given credit for. He knew that the show was about the 3 characters of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and how they and their bond and their relationship. and why that was important. And that's what his movie was about. To unfortunately, the detriment to the secondary cast. They were treated much like they were treated in the original series, as sort of background to help move the plot forward. But that's the thing. The one thing that I really like about this movie is it's of all the TOS films of the 80s, it's the one that feels most like an actual episode of the show. It starts with the teaser, it goes into the credits, you have, and then it's just this, adventure. And it's even got sort of like they're really trying with the effects, but you can tell they had to rush them. They weren't quite there. And so it just has this kind of feeling that it could literally be the episode right after Turnabout Intruder in the original run, which was sort of Shatner's sort of decree, if I remember some of the interviews he gave at the time, is that he really wanted to make his movie feel as if it were an episode of the original series. And I think to that he succeeded. Whether or not the story holds is another, thing. But I think there's something really great to be said about this sort of villain or antagonist who's about releasing your pain, your emotions, confronting your demons. And then that counterpoint of Shatner is that it's our demons and the things we hold within us that make us who we are ultimately and who shape our lives. Kirk very much knows, being one of the most self-aware characters in Star Trek, that when you take away all those experiences, when you fully let them go, then you lose who you are. That it's not about letting go of your pain, but learning to live with it and integrating it into your life. And so I like that sort of philosophical diatribe that's stuck in the middle of this mediocre movie with all the bonding that occurs between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy.
That's perfect. I think you nailed it. I mean, the trifecta being at the center of this movie, definitely more than any of the other three movies, is its strength for sure. I'm not going to. People know that I joke that this is like one of my least favorite 2 hours of Trek, mostly because of the staging and kind of the clunkiness of the direction and some of the story, like you said, not holding up. But the best part about it is Shatner, Kirk, Spock, their interactions. It feels like an episode. And my favorite part is not what does God need with a starship. It's the I need my pain stuff. That's where this is really, really good. Caleb, what's your take on the Final Frontier?
I absolutely agree with the pain part that you were just mentioning. I think DeForest Kelley actually acted his ass off in this movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably my favorite part. He's constantly a bright spot for me when it comes to the acting, both in the original series and in the movies. So I really appreciated how well that dynamic worked with all of them.
Okay, that is, I knew the Final Frontier was going to be in the running. That's fantastic. We have no duplicates yet. We're about halfway through. This is cool. I thought we might have some. I'm sure we will at some point. Caleb, what's your number 3 super round pick?
So I'm making a last minute change. I'm going to swap my second and third picks. So what was my number 2 for all of time throughout making this list until just now, we're going to go with the 5 words: Kirk's turn in a pseudo menagerie. #infect the fountain of youth. It's season 3, episode 17, The Mark of Gideon.
Wow, I love it. It's a cool pick.
I love the beginning of this one. I love the cold open. Kirk just pops up onto an empty Enterprise. That's absolutely nuts. And he's just like, where is everybody? This is bizarre. And then what's her name? Is it
O'Donna?
O'Donna. Yeah. And then he encounters O'Donna, and they're the only two stuck on the ship. The menagerie vibes is what I like most, where you start to see, or they subtly let on that they're all being watched by the rest of the people of Gideon on the other side of these windows for the Enterprise, the duplicate. It does fall apart at the end a little bit. I think that the problem of overpopulation was not as serious as they made it out to be. There were certainly some clear answers to their problems, and they just willingly chose to disregard them. And so it gets kind of ridiculous towards the end of the episode. But the whole first like 30 minutes or so, this is one like Jim, you were saying like the Omega Glory, where I just love the first like half hour of this.
And I was going to say, like Ryan said, this is one of those episodes that I love to just pop in. It's a comfort episode for me. I just like having it on. There's something about Kirk and the quietness of it. And when he runs into O'Donna, and it just, I dig this episode. But it's pure Trek, great statement about population control and the things you can do. And the fact that this was on TV in 1968 or 69 is absolutely incredible. Actually, I think this was probably on our TOS episodes too. Somebody must have picked, our Twilight Zone episodes, I think.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
Ryan, what's your take on the Mark of Gideon?
Yeah, I remember we could talked about it being like a very Twilight Zone-ish episode. The writer in me knows that this episode structurally, thematically, everything just falls apart logically, right? I know that, but I like Caleb said, I do enjoy those first like 30 minutes before the reveal, where Kirk's sort of alone on the ship, and then he finds this blonde woman, and it's almost like his complete like fantasy, right? I have a beautiful woman that I can spend the rest of my life on the ship I love, doing the thing I love. It's almost like this. It's almost like this fantasy of Kirk, right? I have my ship and I have the partner to share it with. And yet, when you think about it, it's like, well, if they're overpopulated, how do they build an exact duplicate deck by deck of the Enterprise, and where is it being housed? So then when your logical brain starts kicking in, then the episode starts to fall apart. But yeah, it has some good stuff in it. It's not the greatest, but it's not by far the worst, I think.
And I like the eeriness at the beginning of it too, especially when they first encounter each other, and the exchange they have is like, do you remember why your people dream of being alone? And then she just responds, because we can never be. And it's like the most cryptic thing ever. But I've always enjoyed like the eerie aspects of some of the early Trek episodes from TOS. And I think that part really put on the list for me.
I like the eeriness. And before we move on, I like what you said about it having that cage feel, or the menagerie feel. I never connected those dots, but it does have that kind of being observed feel for it. So that's a cool connection as well. That is why we do this show, because that gives me a new perspective of the Mark of Gideon. Okay, let's go to close out the Super Round with my round 3 pick. And for this episode, I really thought I was going to pick it for our next episode of TrekRanks, which is episode number 110. And we're going to talk about that at the end of this episode. But instead, after rewatching it, I decided I freaking love this episode. So I'm moving it into my guilty pleasures list. 5 words and a hashtag. Sardonic Spock takes on everyone. Hashtag I am for you. And it is from season 3, episode 14, That Which Survives. And this episode, it's goofy, but I love it. It's got a cool little mystery. And the reason it's a guilty pleasure for me is all the stuff that's happening on the Enterprise, which has been thrown a few thousand light years away, kind of like what we were talking about with Gamesters of Triskelion. And so Kirk and Bones and Sulu and D'Amato are on the away mission. And I love, of course, Lucira popping up. But what I really love is on the Enterprise, you've got Spock has been written as the most pedantic, sardonic, sarcastic, cynical character for an hour. And it is, now he does that every once in a while in episodes. Like you get one or two, like we mentioned the line with that you mentioned earlier, Caleb, with Scotty and saying, I assume the transporter, that they disappeared in a way not consistent with the transporter. Every single line from Spock in this episode, he is criticizing someone. He's being caustic. It is really specific and literal to the language. I am absolutely here for it. The very first line is when Uhura asks him what happened, and he says, the occipital area of my head seems to have impacted with the chair. She's like, no, what happened to the I mean, it's so unlike Spock, but it's hilarious. Later, he's ripping Lieutenant Rada for not having the exact second on her timing of something. I'm going to play you a clip of like 4 or 5 times Spock is being ridiculously caustic right now, so you can enjoy this.
Are you all right?
Yes, I believe no permanent damage was done.
What happened?
The occipital area of my head seems to have impacted with the arm of the chair.
No, Mr. Spock. I meant, what happened to us?
990.7 light years to be exact, Lieutenant.
But that's not possible. Nothing can do that.
Mr. Scott, since we are here, your statement is not only illogical, but also unworthy of refutation. Our ship's chronometers registered a matter of only a few seconds. Therefore, we were displaced through space in some manner which I am unable to fathom.
What you're saying is that the planet didn't blow up, and the captain and the others, they're still alive.
Please, Mr. Scott, restrain your leaps of illogic. I have said nothing. I was merely speculating.
If we can maintain it, our estimated time of arrival is 11 1/2 solar hours.
11.337 hours, Lieutenant. I wish you would be more precise.
Scott to bridge. Scott to bridge.
Spock here.
Mr. Spock, the ship feels wrong.
Feels, Mr. Scott.
I know it doesn't make sense. Instrumentation reads correct, but the feel is wrong. It's something I can't quite put into words.
That is obvious, Mr. Scott. I suggest you avoid emotionalism and simply keep your instruments correct. Spock out.
Warp 13.9 and dropping.
Mr. Scott, you have accomplished your task.
You waited me say thank you.
For what purpose, Mr. Scott? What is it in you humans which requires an overwhelming display of emotion in a situation such as this? 2 men pursue the only reasonable course of action indicated, and yet you feel that something else is necessary.
All right, so that's Spock being super sardonic. Beyond that, I love me some Lee Merriweather as Lucira. There's some great stuff with Scotty and the Jeffries too. He's reversing the polarity, and there's just there's great stuff. There's actually a scene on the planet with the rocks where they built the set on like a gimbal, and it's like shaking around. Like I don't think I've ever seen that in a televised Trek. It's really cool. I love it. Guilty pleasure. This one, by the way, is written by DC Fontana, or the stories by DC Fontana, but she chose an alias as well, Michael Richards. So I have two of my picks are written by Trek or story by Trek legends, but they took their names off of them. That is what a guilty pleasure is all about. All right, shutting up. Caleb, what's your take on That Which Survives?
So this was on my long list. It didn't quite make my secondary systems, but I enjoyed it. I think it suffered from some pacing issues. But besides that, everything on the Enterprise, like you said, exceeding warp 14,
right?
Just Spock going, off on everybody, and then the buzzer beater at the end. I love. If this was a buzzer beater TOS list, that would definitely make it with the reverse polarity tool.
It's funny because I had that in my notes too. I'm surprised it didn't make my underrated or buzzer beaters. It's the first time I'm picking it. So
and Mbenga makes an appearance as well.
And Mbenga makes an appearance. I was going to mention that too because there's this got in the back of my mind. There's a chance his character is going to be a part of Strange New Worlds. We shall see. Ryan, what's your take on That Which Survives?
It's got one of the 3 Catwomen.
Yes.
The Batman show.
Yep.
So I mean, I'm always shocked that they never got Eartha Kitt. They could have completed that trifecta of Catwomen in Star Trek.
And Batgirl with Yvonne Craig from
exactly. And Batgirl. They had Batgirl in the 3rd season too.
Yep.
And she has a wonderful Shatner story if you ever look it up.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it's so wonderful for Shatner, but it's a wonderfully entertaining story. I've had the pleasure of hearing her tell that live at a convention.
She's a legend. But yeah, so the other was Friday's Child, Julie Newmar.
Friday's Child, Julie Newmar.
Yep.
Yeah. But I like this episode. Well, I mean, even if it's a bad episode of TOS, I still like it, right? But you're right. Spock in this episode he is such an a-hole, like beyond a-hole-ish.
It's an hour
in
of
this entire episode. It's like, gosh, it's like, it's just, and he's carrying, and you talk about being pedantic. He carries around that little calculating machine, and it's like he's always typing. And it's like, I'm putting you on report, Mr. Scott, for blah blah blah. He's like the boss in Office Space, right?
Seriously, that's good. That's good. He's like Lungard. It's clearly the way it's written. This is like when you talk about season 3 not having the same quality control, because people like Gene Kuhn were gone and people like Robert Justman were gone. Fred Freiberger gets the blame for it. I don't think he deserves it, but there wasn't the same quality control. So you could have an episode where someone just said, let's just write Spock at the extreme level of Spockness for an hour. And that's what this is.
And that's true. That actually in the Mark of Gideon, he was equally sardonic in that episode too. and that was another season 3. So yeah.
Yeah, it's they kind of lost their focus there, but you know what? 50 years later, I love it. It's so much fun to watch Spock doing that for an hour. Okay, let's go to round 2. Ryan, what's your number 2 pick?
All right, and like Kirk, this is where I start to Kobayashi Maru everything. So 5 words. Uhura is white and blonde. # the vinyl adventures of the Enterprise. So I'm going a little out of, I'm expanding my definition of what an episode is. And I'm going with one of the Power Records Peter Pan LPs that they did, which sometimes came with a comic drawn by like the likes of Neil Adams.
Yeah.
So this one was written by Alan Dean Foster, and that's The Crier and the Emptiness. Which is probably the best one of the Power Records stories in terms of just being the most Trek-like, where they're going about, usual star charting mission. And then there's this odd sound. At first, Kirk thinks it's feedback from the communication station, and Uhura, who is, for some unexplained reason in the comic version of this story that's the read-along, has Nichelle Nichols' hairstyle but is blonde and white, so it doesn't even look like her. And Sulu is the one that's black in the comic, so they kind of didn't get a few details right from the show. But I like that this particular story was about finding a way to communicate with something unknown, this horrible sound that's driving them all nuts. McCoy's being McCoy. Kirk is getting really irritated, as Kirk has want to do occasionally. And Spock's trying to figure it out. And then finally, they just figure out, one of the other crew members figures out it's music. And they start playing this musical instrument and finding a way to communicate with this alien that they can't communicate in a verbal manner. And it just, to me, that's a very Star Trek story, right? It's new. It's strange new life. At first, we think it's threatening, but it turns out it was just trying to say hello, and we find a way to say hello. And for me, all of these records, in 1980, 1981, when there was only really the 79 episodes in syndication, the one Star Trek movie, and the animated show, these were just like getting new adventures of the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And acted out, because the voice actors on these are fantastic. They very much sound like Shatner, Kelly, and Nimoy for the most part. And it's almost, you're almost able to really feel like this is just one of those unseen adventures of the Enterprise.
So this is a deep cut pick. I love it. So for everybody's edification, I remember these because I had a few of these I think it was the late 70s when these were coming out. It used to be a big thing, these Peter Pan records, where you would get a record and like a cartoon book kind of attached to the sleeve, and you could listen to the record and go through the book at the same time. That is some cutting edge media right there. And I think they made about a dozen of these. And this is cool. So Alan Dean Foster wrote this one, huh? I don't remember him being one of the authors. So obviously he's legendary Trek author from way back, and Star Wars as well. That is a deep cut pick. I had a couple of these, but I haven't thought about these probably in 30, 40 years. It just hasn't come up. It's insane. Caleb, do you have any knowledge of these this form of media from the late 70s?
I do not, but now I feel like I need to go on an eBay hunt, and I have my record player still, so that would be an interesting time.
It's cool to do an internet search and just look at some of the artwork. I honestly haven't probably seen it or thought about it in 30 years. So okay, we have our first Peter Pan Records selection. It's the Crier in the Emptiness. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's the Crier in the Emptiness.
Okay, cool. Deep cut. All right, let's go to Caleb. What's your round 2 pick?
All right, so this is the one I bumped up at the last minute because I just love it that much. 5 words. Crisis escalated by Defiant Doctor. # communicator sonic disruptions. It's season 2, episode 11, Friday's Child.
Oh, awesome. You just mentioned it. So we have both Catwoman picks. Julie Newmar. Love it.
I really enjoyed this episode. This is one I liked a lot when I was a kid. Explosions, just fights, tension, all that good stuff. The cartoon, not even the cartoonish swords, the swords that look like they're made out of foam. I just love that.
Yes.
You get some classic lines from McCoy here. The I'm a doctor, not an escalator, right? I'm a big book fan, so I've been getting into a lot of the post-Nemesis novels, and one of the not main characters, but one of the supporting characters is Leonard James Akar, and he's actually an admiral in the post-Nemesis timeline. So I love this origin story for him, even though he's just an infant at the end of it all, but just a really, really compelling episode. I like that the Klingons are involved. I like that Kirk is absolutely just shattered by the fact that one of his crewmen are killed right at the beginning of the episode. Just another red shirt, going down. But it's good. I really like this one.
Yeah, I always think of this episode as like the most underrated of like the really good episodes. So I think this is a great episode. I think it's top 25 at TrekRanks as well. I just think it's right on the fringe of like the really good episodes. And it's one that doesn't get mentioned as much. The Vasquez Rocks scenics, the stuff with Leonard James Akar and Aline, and the back and forth with McCoy and Julie Newmar. It's really, really good. I love this episode. It's a classic. Ryan, I'm sure you do too, right?
Oh yeah, I love this episode. This was another one that was oddly on a lot that I remember as a kid, and I'd always try to, with my Lego communicator, reenact the scene where they set the communicators to
I love that. So
start
cool.
the avalanche.
Yep.
That's straight up physics and resonance. I love it.
And I also love the whole like coochie coo.
Yeah. Coochie.
You'll find it in all the databases, Spock. Just look it up. It's also another very strong script from DC Fontana.
Yep.
She tends to write really great female characters, and Aline is very memorable. Also, that she decks McCoy, although it's questionable that McCoy decks her back. That's kind of like, what kind of bedside manner is that, Doctor? But I really like that character, and of course it's Julie Newmar, who's known for her, statuesque figure, but has to spend most of her time in this episode in like a fake pregnancy thing. So I thought, that's a little. I like that different contrast of almost giving her something different to do than what she's typically given as an actress.
Yeah, she is. She's so good. I'll just close by saying I think it was the last convention I was at, STLV in 2019. The actor who played Ma'ab, the kind of leader of the Capellans, somebody asked him to reenact his scene where he gets shot by the Klingon, and it was awesome. He stood up there, this old guy, put his arms out, and I can't remember what he yells at the Klingon, but it's something like Klingon, and gets shot. It's so great. That was hilarious.
As Tia of the 10 tribes, I give you back your life. Mine is now forfeit. Keel, stand ready.
Swing on!
I'm a nerd. Okay. Anybody else see that at the STLV? I think there was only a few of us in that panel.
No.
Anyway, let's go to my round 2 pick. We are through 2 rounds with no duplicates. This is very cool. I thought there might be some. We'll see what round 1 brings us. But my number 2 pick, 5 words and a hashtag, can't beam up a fly, hashtag, Scotty, you're fired. And it is TOS Season 2. It's the Apple. And you can say whatever you want about this episode. I love it. It's number 50 at TrekRanks for me. It's just cool. It's got this amazing scope. There's red shirts dying all over the place. The production design's super cool with the sets, and I mean Vol and the lightning and the great interaction between our main heroes on the planet and Scotty up on the ship, and the kind of the normal thing where he loses power and the ship's gonna crash into the atmosphere and burn up if he can't fix it. It's just got all these great Star Trek tropes. It's just something about this episode that really stands out to me. This is a Gene L. Kuhn script as well, directed by Joseph Pevney, Akuta. We have David Soul from Starsky and Hutch. I just think it's super cool, and I love at the end when Spock's just like, when Kirk's just like, it's freedom, you're gonna love it, and Akuta's like, but it was Vol who put the fruit on the trees and caused the rain to fall. He cared for us. You're okay. We're going to teach you how to do it yourself. I love the Apple. It is classic, retro, sci-fi, fun. Ryan, what's your take on the Apple?
Oh, I do love the Apple. It's also one of those episodes where you point to it and it encapsulates what people think the popular opinion of Star Trek is, right? Because it just has a massive amount of red shirt deaths within this 50 minutes of action adventure.
It's like 4 of them.
They're dying left and right. But, like one of the things you did mention is the set design. And I really like that look of Vol. I mean, and obviously people loved it so much that they made a toy of it when they did the Mego figures. But also I like that there was like little attentions to detail that I don't think people catch. When Spock throws the rock and it explodes and the one red shirt dies because he steps on a rock. If you notice in the scene when they're feeding Vol, that's what they're actually feeding Vol, is those explosive rocks. So it's kind of like, I like the attention to detail in this episode of this village society and how they're there to keep Vol working and Vol keeps them alive. And the one last thing that I really love about this episode, sure, the ship's in danger. Sure, they got to stop Vol to save the ship and break the Prime Directive to save the ship. But really, Kirk breaks the Prime Directive because he realizes that this planet is not having kids.
Right.
They're not mating. They're not having sex. I mean, we can, they don't say it directly, but that's sort of what Kirk kind of sees, right? And he even says, like, when the little ones come, well, you'll find out. You'll have fun finding out about that. He just is kind of like, whoa, that is the most Kirk-like thing. They're not having sex? Well, we got to tear down their society.
Yes, that's pretty much the crux of the episode, but I'm glad you mentioned that thing about the rocks. That's a really great attention to detail in this episode. Caleb, what's your take on it?
So I enjoy this one as well. I think in terms of just the original series, we know that part of the reason it ran in color was so they could sell, more color TVs and everything, right? And one of this episode is one of the most colorful episodes. I mean, the people are straight up orange, and I love that. You get to see, and there's got to be a reason all these red shirts are suddenly perishing, because that's all the color they had on the screen at the time. But no, I enjoy this one. I actually was just looking something up. I did not realize this, but one of the red shirts his name is Hendorf.
Oh yeah,
does not survive, but Hendorf in the Kelvin movies, the cupcake. Yeah. So it's cool that they brought him back and that he survived through those 3 movies, even though he did not survive the apple.
Yep. I noticed that when I was rewatching it. I mean, I knew it before, but when he said Hendorf, I was like, oh yeah, Hendorf's in this. That's a great little Kelvin callback. All right, let's go to round 1. Ryan, what's your number 1 pick?
All right. 5 words of the 1960s spinoff that wasn't. Hashtag the best fan film made ever. So once again, extending my definition of what an episode is, I chose Starship Exeter's 2nd episode, the Tresarian Intersection. And for those of you that don't know, is Starship Exeter was a TOS fan film that, they did an episode back in like 2005 or something like that. And then they went to do a 2nd episode, which is this episode, the Tresarian Intersection, which is written actually by Dennis Bailey, or co-written by Dennis Bailey, who was one of many contributors to TNG. He wrote the 3rd season episode, Tin Man, and then also contributed to the 4th season episode, First Contact. And this, of all the fan films, captured the actual essence of TOS. Not only just the look of the ship, great sets, even some model work in terms of the effects. It has this great cold open where they beam down to the planet and they find the crash saucer of one of their sister ships. These villains that look like the Mego action figures of the Gorn with the reptilian head and the Klingon-like uniforms. And it's just great fun. And, there were other fan films, like New Voyages and all that. But I think of all of them, this is the one that got that. It's the captain who's in charge, who drives the action. It's the captain character that makes the story work. And, I have to confess, why it's also a guilty pleasure is because I had a small hand in getting this film finished 10 years after they started it, because they sort of released one act after a time and then became this great unfinished fan film until about 4 or 5 years ago. And one of my good friends, Maurice Molyneux, worked on it as well when they originally did it, helped with some of the script stuff, some of the graphic design. But me and another friend, Mark Farinas, went over to Maurice's house and sort of filmed some insert shots that were missing for the climax of the episode. So nice little credit at the end. So a little shameless plug, but
well, if there was ever going to be a fan film picked on TrekRanks, it should be on a TOS Guilty Pleasures episode. So I don't really know the Exeter fan films that well. I've heard of them, but I've definitely never seen one. Is it? I just need to ask because the Exeter, of course, is Ronald Tracy's ship from the Omega Glory. Is it? Is there a character? Is Ronald Tracy in this? Is he a character?
Oh no! So the storyline is that the Exeter, after the Deadly Years, is taken back, cleaned up.
Got it.
So there's no nasty viruses, and all the little salt granules of the dead crew are cleaned up, and it's recommissioned. And the captain is actually a guy named Garavik, who's related to Captain Garavik, and is related to is the brother of the character that's in Obsession.
From Obsession, yeah. Cool. Okay.
So that's one of the things about fan films is there's a lot of wink, wink.
Yep.
Connect the dots type of thing.
There's a lot of fun stuff in fan films. Caleb, I'm sure you haven't seen this one, but any take on fan films in general?
Man, Ryan, it's my spring break. Why are you assigning so much homework for me?
Because it's your spring break, dude.
I know. No, I haven't seen these. I'll have to check them out, though. I'm intrigued. Garavik, I'm actually reading Die Standing right now, which is the Filippo Georgiou novel that takes place in between seasons 1 and 2. And Garavik actually gets a mention there. So,
all right,
it's interesting.
Love all those connections. Okay, so Caleb, how about you? What's your round 1 pick?
All right, I am going to start it how I ended it, with an alliterative 5 words. Here we go. Sneaky, shape-shifting sadist shatters Shatner. Hashtag Queen to Queens level 3. It's Gods Destroy.
I'm so excited. So we get 2 Catwoman picks and a Batgirl pick with Yvonne Craig, Whom Gods Destroy. Marta lives, everybody. Go, Caleb. Sorry.
This episode, I am surprised. I enjoyed this episode when I was younger. I probably did not realize exactly how brutal it was until I did a rewatch, but it is a brutal episode.
Brutal.
And, I'm a big fan of Discovery and Deep Space Nine. I like dark Star Trek. I know not everyone likes dark Star Trek, but I love dark Star Trek. And this one, I'm going to be maybe semi-controversial here. I actually think Garth Vizar is even more diabolical and savage than Khan. And I might have enjoyed The Wrath of Khan more if it was Garth of Izar instead of Khan.
Ooh, interesting.
Ooh.
Yeah, he has the ability to shapeshift, which he learned from the Antosians. What an underrated power, right? I'm glad we ended up getting shapeshifters as a primary enemy in DS9. You get Marta, who just... the scene where she tries to sneak up on Kirk and just stab him. He's my lover and I have to kill him. I'm like, who does that?
I know. It's amazing.
No, you mustn't stop me. He's my lover and I have to kill him.
And even the points where Shatner gets tortured, I actually laughed, as terrible as it is. I laughed because the faces he was making, I'm surprised they haven't been memed or gifted or gifed at some point in time yet. And I am going to make it my mission to now find a meme of Shatner getting tortured by Garth, because the faces he makes are just hilarious. And then to wrap it all up, you get double Kirk at the end, right? And Spock has to try to solve the dilemma. And here's another sardonic Spock dig where he's just like, well, I was able to tell you apart because of your depleted condition, Captain. Just completely owns Kirk. He's like, wow, thanks.
I love it. This is a great pick. It's definitely on my list of episodes I would have considered if I hadn't already picked it previously. I'm a huge fan of Marta, and Garth of Izar, man, that is an interesting villain. You're not incorrect in saying that he would have been great to see on the big screen, and bringing him back in a role, because he is diabolical. I think the words you used, and that is accurate. I'm a fan of Whom Gods Destroy. It's brutal. It's kind of tough to watch, but I think it's absolutely worthy of a number one selection like that. Ryan, what's your take on it?
This is not one of my favorites, and I don't know why exactly. I think maybe it's the whole mental institution aspect of the thing that makes it a little hard for me. You're right, Caleb. It's a very brutal episode. Marta just the way she gets exits from the episode is very hard to take, right? But one thing I do agree with Caleb that you said, I do also like dark Star Trek. I think that's why I'm a big fan of a lot of the earlier season 1 episodes, because those all have very dark, sort of sorrowful endings. But now I'm going to go and imagine the Wrath of Garth instead of the Wrath of Khan.
I like it. I find it interesting in the contrast to for me, the empath is way more difficult and brutal to watch. So it's funny how we all have different perspectives on it. But it's totally, listen, this episode almost should come with a warning at the beginning, because it is when Marta dies, that is very difficult to watch.
Believe it or not, I think on the BBC they actually banned this along with 3 other episodes for an extended period of time. And I think one of the other ones was it one that I picked? I can't remember, or maybe it was one that I had in my secondary systems. But actually, the empath, I think the empath was also banned because of the torture.
Yeah.
And it's with Miri too, I think was.
Would not find that surprising. Oh, Miri was on my secondary system. Really close to picking that as well. All right, let's close it out with my round 1 pick. We are closing out with a duplicate. It's a return from Caleb's round 5 pick. And my 5 words in a hashtag: help me, Spock. Help me. Hashtag image of Sirach. And it is season 3, The Savage Curtain. We talked about it already, so we don't have to get too deep into it. But I love this episode. And I guess I guess it's because 10-year-old Jimmy has always loved this episode. And it's one of the ones that when I found out that people kind of really rip on this episode, I was shocked when I was older. Could not believe it. The Abraham Lincoln stuff, the Excalibur that we talked about. By the way, the creature design on that is just so mind-blowingly good for 1969 television. Just absolutely fantastic. The world building, the fisticuffs, the staging of the fisticuffs of this is just terrible. It's literally like kids playing cops and robbers in the schoolyard, but who cares?
Your Surak is a brave man.
Men of peace usually are, Captain. On Vulcan, he is revered as the father of our civilization. The father image holds much meaning for us.
You show emotion, Spock?
I deeply respect what he has accomplished.
Well, I hope he accomplishes something here, and soon.
Help me, Spock!
We're all having fun, and everybody's got something to do in this. Bones, Scotty, Sulu, Uhura, Chekhov's there. It's I just love it. So any final comments on the Savage Curtain, Caleb?
You know, I keep thinking about the current state of Star Trek and just how cinematic everything is now. And it goes back to the creature design, right? The rock monster. I honestly think a lot of the episodes we picked here today have a really strong foundation, and with a couple of tweaks and a revamp would be absolutely top tier Trek if they were remade today.
No doubt about that. No doubt about that. Ryan, want to close it out? Any final comments on Savage Curtain?
Yeah, I didn't comment about this. I'm glad you brought up the creature design, because I think TOS of all the Treks until this current modern era, it was the one that tried to do the most alien looks, even if they would come across as maybe not so hot today, seen from today's eyes, but back then, the Excalibans, I mean, that's like how more alien can you get, or the Horta. So I like that they try to present with us things that did not exactly fit within that humanoid physicality.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I feel like sometimes I'm in the minority on this. Sorry, I think the Excalibur and the Horta, I think those stand the test of time. I think those look good today on high def. They look more real to me than, and again, I'm not denigrating Forehead of the Week. I would never do that. I hate that term. But, when you just have a random alien show up with a few extra bumps, I'm sorry, the Horta looks real to me to this day. And so does the Excalibur. So I don't know.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I can suspend my disbelief even if it doesn't even look, I mean, Star Trek aside, any sci-fi that at least attempts something, wildly different, even if it doesn't always work, I'm willing to suspend my disbelief because they've tried something that hasn't been tried before. And in that, I appreciate the effort.
I love it.
Let's see what you can do with the secondary systems.
Okay. Anybody got any secondary systems? Ryan.
Yeah, the Game Masters of Triskelion was one of my secondary systems, and we've already talked about that.
Yep.
I also I know this is a Monster of the Week, and it wasn't the greatest episode to start Star Trek off with, but I do have an affinity for the Man Trap.
Yeah. That's a good guilty pleasure. I didn't think of that one, but that's a good one.
I think it's a good one because it's a good monster episode.
Yep.
And then my other guilty pleasure, even though it's not really an episode, but I love the Gold Key comics. I love the Gold Key comics. They are nothing they don't look Star Trek.
That's why
they almost look like a bizarro universe Star Trek. Like if you close your eyes, maybe it's Star Trek.
I know a lot of people love them, but that's why I just had never got into them. But that's a good secondary systems based on some of your picks there. It makes sense. Caleb, any episodes you want to highlight before we move on?
Sure, I got a couple. So Requiem for Methuselah.
That's a cool.
Anytime like a Enterprise model shows up on screen, I really like that. I also thought that this gave some very solid groundwork for the androids we see in Picard, because Reyna doesn't really know that she's an android until halfway through. So I really appreciated that. And then at the end, the whole forget mind meld, which is important for Wrath of Khan. Remember, full circle there, which is kind of cool. I've always liked For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky. I don't have much to say about it. I've always liked that.
I like it too.
I echo Ryan with the Man Trap. And we talked about it briefly, but Obsession. And I think that one, just because I'm currently reading that Giorgio novel, and we get a lot of the stuff that is going on at the beginning of that novel is all about the Farragut and what happened when that dichronium cloud passed through. That's kind of the beginning framework of the novel. And so I almost made it, but I'm like, it's only making it because of a book. I should hold off.
Well, now I know the context for Garvik. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I only have a couple, so because a lot of mine were on this eliminated list. So my toughest cut was the Paradise Syndrome, and I know the visuals are very, very, very problematic with the depiction of Native Indigenous people. So that's not good. But the story's really good. The story's cool. It's one of the things about that story I love is that it takes place across a couple of months. And 2 or 3 months, and the Kirok story, the God Who Bleeds, and Spock and McCoy. I really enjoy watching that episode and just trying to forget about the problematic era in which it was made and how it's represented, because the story is actually good. I also like Miri. People trash this episode, and I think it's really powerful. It's a little too dark for me to pick as a guilty pleasure, but I think I got a lot of empathy for the first scene where the guy runs out and just wants his broken tricycle fixed. So I think that's not a bad episode. And on my eliminated list, obviously The Way to Eden, that was on my Grew to Love episodes. Gamesters of Triskelion, The Cloudminders was on my underrated. Cat's Paw, Whom Gods Destroy, For the World is Hollow, Bread and Circuses, and Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which is super underrated. All right, lots of ground covered there for TOS. Great to get back and talk about a 55-year-old show that I still feel like breaks new ground when you see it under a new lens every time you watch it. All right, let's get into our regeneration cycle and go through some quick stats and a recap of our picks.
Computer, activate regeneration cycle. Alcoves beta and gamma.
Okay, Ryan, run down your 5 picks.
All right, number 5 was Spock's brain.
Brain and brain. What is brain?
Number 4 was The Empath. Number 3 was Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. And here's where things go off the rails. Number 2 was the Star Trek Power Records Peter Pan album Crier in the Emptiness. And number 1 was the Star Trek TOS fan film Starship Exeter, The Trisarian Intersection.
All right, that's some major guilty pleasure coverage there, because you had 2 from season 3, a film, and then the book and record dealios from the 70s and a fan film. I love it. Caleb, how about you? Break down your 5.
All right, my number 5 pick was The Savage Curtain. Number 4 pick, The Gamesters of Triskelion. Number 3, The Mark of Gideon. Yeah. Number 2 this time, Friday's Child. See, I switched them, but I'm still reading.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Anyway, so number 2 was Friday's Child, and then number 1 was Whom Gods Destroy.
Fantastic. So 2 from season 2 and 3 from season 3, which makes sense. My breakdown was the same. I had number 5, The Omega Glory. Number 4, Spectre of the Gun. Number 3, That Which Survives. Number 2, The Apple. And my number 1 was The Savage Curtain. So we had a grand total of 1 duplicate. And I love this stat. We had 2 Catgirls and 1 Batgirl picks. So that's just super cool. Our season breakdown, no surprise, there was 0 from season 1. But I really like that man trap thought that you had there in the secondary systems, Ryan. Season 2 had 4 We had one film, 2 wildcard picks from Ryan with a fan film and the book records, and then 8 total from season 3. So more than half, which makes perfect sense because that is what season 3 is known for. One last stat, 6 picks with Kirk fisticuffs front and center of our guilty pleasures, which also makes a whole lot of sense. So, all right, I love this topic, but as we do every week, we've been hit by temporal distortion. So before we can depart, it's time to hear from you.
The temporal distortions are fracturing space-time throughout the ship.
Cause? Unknown.
We know the cause, Mr. Tuvok. Gets all the amazing feedback that we continue to get from all of our listeners here at TrekRanks, and this week's temporal distortion has sent us back to episode 101 and our Trek 101 topic, a unique show in which we asked all our guests and listeners to choose their own 101 lesson related to Trek with their unique look at Star Trek, and I really was blown away by how much feedback we got. So I'm going to go through a couple of these lists right now, more than we normally do, because I think these 101 courses in Trek are really cool. First up, from Peter at Peter Trek 1, his prime directive, he did the history of Trek, and he's been interested in the history of the franchise. Well, it's currently strong, especially on TV. That's not always been the case. So he picked 5 episodes that helped create or build the franchise to what it is today. Number 5 was from Discovery, The Vulcan Hello, Trek for the Current Generation, # New Trek Begins, and basically the rebirth of Trek after 12 years away from TV with kind of a darker palette and the serialized storytelling. Number 4, TNG's Encounter at Farpoint, 5 words and # first post TOS Trek, # can Trek succeed. A great pick for bringing Trek back to TV in the shadow of TOS. Number 3, he had Returns After 10 Years Away, # they gave her back to me, Scotty. It's Star Trek The Motion Picture, 10 years coming back after TOS left. Number 2, 5 words and # second chance for first impression, # forming the TOS band, and it's where no man has gone before, and the fact that it was a second pilot. I love this list. It's super cool. And number 1, he going backwards in time here, I see now, is TOS is the Cage, his 5 words and # the birth of a franchise, # picked up 54 years later, a reference to Strange New Worlds. Really, really cool. His secondary systems, he has Star Trek 2009, another rebirth point, Best of Both Worlds, a cliffhanger kind of starting point for that. Emissary, first show not set on a starship, and Broken Bow, the first prequel Trek show. Really, really cool history of Trek list from Peter Trek 1 on Twitter. Okay. We also had a great list from Sam Nelson. This one's a lot shorter, but it's just as impactful. Sam Nelson at SL Nelson 77. His prime directive was what makes great sci-fi and how does Star Trek fit? Exploration, TNG's Where Silence Has Lease. Action, Discovery's Such Sweet Sorrow. Space-time, Voyager's Year of Hell. Fun, D Space Nine's Bada Bing Bada Bang, and family, TOS's movie trilogy, The Wrath of Khan, The Search for Spock, and The Voyage Home. So super cool list from Sam. And then one more. We're gonna have Chris on soon. It's Crossfield Chris at Shelf Nerds. His prime directive, and he's a teacher as well, so he taught AP language. He really wanted to have his students dig deep in philosophy and ethics as a way to challenge their argumentative skills in writing and discussion. So he crafted a week-long mini units around Trek episodes paired with academic reading. So his 5 words and a # for number 5. Don't FOMO, just know more. # Gilgamesh. Of course, it's Darmok. Number 4, Death with Dignity and Resolution. # Y60. And that, of course, is Half a Life from TNG. Number 3, whoever defines personhood defines morality. # my rights, my life. And this is A Measure of a Man from TNG. Number 2, medical ethics and designer babies. # delete the Klingon. That is a great #. Voyager's lineage. Oh, man, that's so good. And such a good episode. Underrated. And his number 1, Why We Always Need Fiction. # write the words. And it, of course, is Benny and Far Beyond the Stars. Really, really cool list from our Trek 101. I wanted to give that a little extra time. So Sorry for just rattling off so many lists there, but worthy submissions. So once again, those picks more than enough to get us out of this week's Temporal Distortion. So as always, I want to thank everyone for all your great responses to the TrekRanks podcast. Please keep all your lists coming to me at TrekRanks on Twitter so we can retweet them. But we also want to hear from you. So put together your own list of top 5 TOS Guilty Pleasure episodes or a list from any of our past shows. Give us a call at the Tricorder Transmissions at 609-512-5527, or you can just record it and send it to me directly on DM, and we can do it that way. So hopefully we'll hear from you so you can be featured on the next episode of TrekRanks. And on the next episode of TrekRanks, we are doing a very, very cool topic for episode 110. That's episode 110, or in another parlance, maybe episode 110 or 11001001. It's episode 110. So we are doing our top 5 computer crises. Computers are always breaking down or at the root of some drama. So we're doing computer crises on episode 110. But our caveat is that you cannot pick the binars or episode 11001001. So that's what we're doing. Computer crises. So this is a tough one. Ryan and Caleb, if you had to choose one computer crises in Trek history off the top of your head, what would it be? Ryan, what do you got?
From the animated series, The Practical Joker.
Oh, that's perfect.
Kirk is a jerk.
Oh my God, that is perfect. That is absolutely would be the best animated series pick. I was about to say there's a ton of them in TOS. A lot of computer crises in TOS. Caleb, what's yours?
I gotta shout out M5. I mean,
yes, the ultimate computer.
You can't go on without mentioning M5 on this.
It's going to be tough to not have the M5 get a serious shout out on episode 110, our computer crises. All right, so looking forward to that one. Should be a lot of fun. So before we go, a huge thanks to Ryan T. Riddle and Caleb Dorsch. It was great to have you guys on the show.
I was wondering if you could show me how to access these subspace communications logs.
So any final Trek subspace communications, either one of you guys want to relay before we depart? Ryan.
Yeah, hey, it's great being on. Pleasure always. Love talking about TOS. If you guys want to still check me out, at Ryan T. Riddle on Twitter and RyanThomasRiddle.com.
Track him down. And Caleb, hope you had fun. Great to finally get you on, man.
Yeah, I've had a blast. Again, you can check me out on Twitter. I'm also in a band. I play bass and guitar, and we just finished recording a new EP. We're called A Place in Time, and that'll be coming out sometime in June.
Awesome.
Make sure you put that on your Twitter so we can all check that out.
We're a pop punk band, so if you like pop punk, we're not Boldly Go, but we are definitely pretty heavy pop punk.
I love it. Well, we love Boldly Go, and we love 5-Year Mission here, so we will definitely check that out. All right, thanks everyone again for engaging with us here on episode 109 of the TrekRanks podcast. As always, I want to close by saying I'm looking forward to standing with you again here in this place where I belong.
They sacrificed hundreds just to throw us out in the open. And then they came, and they came. They drained 4 of our phasers, and they still came. We killed thousands, and they still came.
Just want to remind everyone again that the entire TrekRanks catalog is available for you to download and listen to at TrekRanks.com and on your podcast player of choice. Our episodes never get carbon dated, so check out the topics you've missed and maybe just want to listen to again over at TrekRanks.com. And a reminder to check out our friends 5-Year Mission at 5yearmission.net. They're writing a song for every episode of Star Trek, and you won't believe how great their music is. They also have a podcast at the Trek Geeks Network, so seek them out. You won't regret it.
There's a cave in there. Probably the only shelter around here.
I'll need help getting her in there.
No.
Look, I'm a doctor, not an escalator. Spock, give me a hand.
No. I will allow only your touch.